Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Bruno Albuquerque. I'm speaking from Patos de Minas now. And can you let me know where you're watching this from, just so that we, warm up? Goiás, Rio de Janeiro, Equador. That's great, Irene. Guarulhos, São José do Rio Preto, Avaré, Itanhaém, Los Angeles, BH, Marcel, Brasília. That's my hometown. I miss Brasília. Today is day 2,600 of the pandemic, and it's been around 2,000 days that I don't see my family back in Brasília. So, yeah, I do miss the city and my people there. So good afternoon, everyone. So without further ado, I'd like to thank you all for being here. Know that I deeply value your time and your availability for being here today on a Wednesday afternoon to participate in this conversation. So welcome. Before we start, I'd like you to type in the chat, what are your expectations for this session? What made you come to this session? Why are you here? Why did you come? Are you a CPD fanatic that you get every opportunity of professional development that you see? That's you, Donadio. Yeah. The theme is very interesting. And you read the blog. That's great. To know the effect, to know what this is about. Yeah. So have you got your coffee? Hello, Curitiba. Improve online lessons. Gabriela, this session is not specifically directed to online teaching. It's more to teaching in general. But I hope that with this session, your online lessons will be a bit more communicative or help students have more authentic conversations in their classes. So, shall we start? Today's focus is we're going to be looking at these questions. You love Dora, and that's why you're here. Isn't that great? Okay, so these are the focus questions of our session today. And one of my objectives is that you're able to leave this session being able to confidently answer these questions. Okay, so what I'd like you to do now is take a screenshot of this, take a picture with your cell phones, and as we go through the session, you refer back to the questions and try to answer them. Can we do that? Yeah, Jailton, that's what we're doing. We're going to define display questions, referential questions, describe what I call the Dora Explorer Effect. Hi, Eleni from Florianopolis. Oh, beautiful city. I miss the beach in Floripa. Big time. Last time I was in Florianopolis, I went to the beach wearing shoes, pants, and a shirt. Couldn't actually enjoy the beach. I better from Fortaleza. So, shall we start? First things first, I'd like to tell you a bit where this idea to talk about, where Dora Explorer Effect came from. It is obviously not something you're going to find in any literature aside from my blog post. So don't take the Dora Explorer Effect too seriously. It's more a play word, it's more something to be funny. And I think that these funny things help us remember what we want to focus on. So the Dora Explorer Effect came from, the idea came from a conversation I was having with my girlfriend, who happens to be a teacher of English as well. And she was saying that, she was explaining that sometimes she feels like Dora the Explorer. when asking questions to her students and expecting answers, and sometimes students not answering or answering their questions. And then I started paying attention to the kinds of questions I would ask my students. And I observed a couple of peers to pay attention to the kind of questions that they were asking. And I came up with this say joke of the Dora Explorer Effect. If you're not familiar with the Dora Explorer Effect, it's with the Dora Explorer, the cartoon, I'm sorry. It's a cartoon that aims at entertaining children and teaching them English and Spanish. So the most common version that we see in Brazilian TV, I think it's teaching kids English, but I've seen it teaching as well. So where does the idea of the Dora Explorer Effect came from? So during the show, Dora asks questions to which she obviously knows the answers to the audience at home, to the kids. She pauses for a while so that to give students time to answer the question, and then she repeats the question back to the audience, right? I suppose she does that because, well, there's no interaction, right? So the cartoon was already recorded, drawn, designed, and that Dora cannot listen to the kids, obviously. But I've come to realize that I was doing a lot of Dora interactions with my students. So the Dora Explorer Effect would be the situation in which we ask our students questions we obviously know the answers to, wait a while for them to answer, and then repeat the answer back to students. Or we give them feedback on the answer. So in this session, we're going to explore a bit what are two different kinds of questions that we can ask our students, and how we can ask better questions to give students more opportunities of authentic conversations in class, and why that is important in my point of view. All right, so the first kind of question we're going to discuss is display questions. Display questions are questions used to check students' understanding, assess learning, and check instructions. For example, is I've done my homework, talking about the past or the present. In this picture, where's the book? How many people participate in this conversation we just listened? Or the silly one, I've asked this a million times to my students when teaching, there are there any elephants in the classroom? These are questions to which the teacher knows the answer, and it is obvious to the students that the teacher knows the answers. One of my friends, I sent her the article, and she said that while she was talking to her family about it, and her daughter replied, "Mom, I think Dora is blind." And then she laughed, like, because come on, how come Dora doesn't see the dog at the end of the path, right? How can't Dora see Raposo hiding behind the bush? He's obviously there, right? And then I thought to myself, do our students get the same feeling, the same vibe from us, as if we're either blind or that we're constantly testing them? As in, we show a picture to student, the book is on the table, and we ask, where is the book? We clearly know the answer, and the student knows that we know the answer. So do students know that we're testing them every time? And I don't mean to say that display questions are not important. Quite the opposite. Display questions are very, very important. For example, the first question there is, I've done my homework, talking about the past or the present. That's a concept checking question, right? We're checking concepts. We're checking if students understood the concept of present perfect in this sentence, in this case. So I believe it is very important, right? We have to know if our students understood what we're teaching or not, right? But I believe that if our lessons are dominated by these kinds of questions, interaction that students will have in the class will feel very inauthentic. And this is where referential questions come in. Referential questions are questions freighted with meaning and intentionality. What does that mean? It's a real question. It's a question to which the person who is asking the question doesn't know the answer to the question. Which, if you pay attention to our, I don't like the term real life, because I think classroom interactions is they are part of real life, right? So if we're looking at a student's perspective, real life happens 60%, 70% in the classroom. So I think it's quite mean to say that classroom interactions are not real life interactions. I think they are, for kids, they are most of their real life interactions. But the idea here is that outside the classroom, in authentic conversations out there in the world with people, we ask them questions because we want to get information that we don't have, right? So for example, what do you think of these authors, of the author's point of view when you're reading a text? What would you like to ask the person who took this picture? I think this is a much better question, a much deeper question that fosters deeper cognitive processes, much better question than where is the book, for example, right? Of course, asking where's the book is important, not saying that it's not, but we want to give students more to think about, to develop critical thinking, to go through deeper cognitive processes in our classes, and to make our classes feel more authentic. For example, if you're looking at a picture and you're exploring a picture again, why do you think the people in this picture are smiling? Yeah. What did you do last weekend? And what did you do last weekend is a dangerous question, in my opinion, because if it's not a question that has meaning and intentionality, it can become an empty question, what we call an IRF interaction. IRF stands for initiation, response, feedback. For example, what did you do last weekend? That's initiation. Oh, I went to the mall with my mom to buy a t-shirt. Saudades, né? Ir pro mall, comprar t-shirt. And then that's the response. And then teacher says, oh, good. André, what did you do last weekend? This is IRF. This is not a real interaction, right? We don't usually ask, what did you do last weekend? Students respond, and you say, good, and you move on. We often ask people what they did on their weekend so we can comment, so we can talk about our weekend, right? It's just like that silly, morbid joke. You ask, what happened last weekend? And then the student says, oh, teacher, last weekend my dog died. And I say, no, your dog died. Repeat after me. My dog died. It's because this teacher is not paying attention to what students are really saying. They're listening, they're asking a question that was once devised as a real question, as a referential, but they transform the intention behind the referential question to a display question, because I don't want to hear what my student did last weekend or what happened to my student last weekend. I want to know if they can use the simple past. And that's all I'm paying attention to, if they can use the simple past. And that's sad, because no student comes to no student is too much, right? But the majority of students don't come to class to use the simple past. They come to class to talk, to communicate, and to learn how to communicate. Not only adult learners, children as well, teenagers, right? So the idea here is having a balance between referential questions and display questions. So Thornbury says that conversation is predictable because one turn follows the other. Some conversations are more predictable if you're interacting, for example, at a restaurant to order food. This conversation is very predictable. There are even some phrases you know that you're going to ask. If you're asking for directions, this conversation is very predictable. If you're buying clothes, this conversation is very, very predictable. But at the same time, because conversations are locally assembled, they depend on the context of where they are, and they are spontaneous. They are, what's the word? Oh my, I forgot. Not planned, they are, okay, I forgot. But they are unpredictable. It takes place in real time. It has this balance between predictability and unpredictability. So this tension between the predictable and the unpredictable makes conversation, a real conversation, an ideal medium for instruction. No, it's not. It's not authentic at all. It's improvised. It's improvised. So this is why I often tell my students that we know that it's important to give students thinking time before speaking activities, right? We want to give them time to organize their thoughts, to think about what they're going to say, maybe take a couple notes. But it is always important to tell students not to write a paragraph, because reading the paragraph is not conversation. Reading the paragraph is reading, is not speaking, right? So maybe you want students to write bullet points and then look at the bullet points and make conversation out of the bullet points, because it has to be improvised. It has to be on the spot. It has to be locally assembled. And this is what makes conversation real conversation. Otherwise, you're just reading a paragraph or you're reading a dialogue. So that's not conversation. That's just uttering sounds and uttering words. Hi, Teresa. Good afternoon. So the idea here is that we want to have this balance between the predictable and the unpredictable. If we only ask display questions, we only get the predictable. If we only ask referential questions, we're going to have lots of unpredictability, some predictability, but we lose concept checking questions. We lose the assessment, the ability to assess students live and to decide where to take the class based on the answers they give us. So what I want with this, what I'd like to achieve with this session today, with this webinar, is a balance between display and referential questions. Because what I felt in my classes specifically, and the few peers I observed, is that we ask much more, many more display questions rather than referential questions. So, and Yasmini asked a fantastic question. How can we avoid this with elementary beginner students, right? Because if we have students, I mean, intermediate and advanced students, that's easier. right? You're going to ask their opinion. You're going to ask what they think. You're going to ask them to explore further the picture, etc. Right? But with beginner students, is a bit trickier. That's true, and I do not have the a magical answer to that question, but I have some suggestions. So, for example, how can we ask better questions? I brought a couple of suggestions. First things first, I think the mindset that we need here is, do I know the answer to this question? It's a display question most of the time. So what you're trying to do is ask questions to which you don't have a hidden agenda or you don't have the answer yet. So if you're dealing with elementary students, information gap helps definitely, Carol. So for example, if you're having students doing the drawing activity, so you get one student to write down a set of instructions, the other student is going to write to draw. So the student that's drawing is going to ask questions to this student. Is there a lion in the picture? The student doesn't know the answer to that question, right? So he's going to ask a real, authentic question, right? And then the other student is going to answer that, right? So information gap is super helpful. Another thing to do is try to go beyond what you can see. So instead of asking, you're teaching, there is, there are, in question forms. Instead of asking, are there desks in the classroom, which is an obvious question, maybe you can ask, are there any students who like pizza in the classroom? Are there students who like chocolate in the classroom? You don't know the answer to that question, and it works just the same. Are there Justin Bieber fans in the classroom? So the key thing here, and if you've been to my session on gamification, the thing is that coming up with an easy solution to education is never possible, in my opinion. So we problematize things, we see the problems, and we try to think about solutions. So I think that asking questions about things that you cannot see is a possible solution. For example, another possible solution to this is using Bloom's taxonomy. So these are verbs that are on the top half of the pyramid. So I think that if you use these verbs as inspiration to your questions, maybe not use the verbs in the questions, but creating activities and perhaps even asking questions. How can you support this? How can you compare? Can you compare this and that? Can you choose something? Can you classify? Can you sketch? Can you contrast? Can you evaluate something? So I think using these verbs will help you ask questions that will challenge students further than Dora questions, than display questions alone. So I think this is a good way to think of your classroom activities. Thinking of assemble, design, compare, demonstrate. Demonstrate is brilliant, right? So demonstrate can take form of a show and tell with elementary students, right? So students will show something, they will talk about this something they brought, right? And then their P can ask authentic questions to them. So why is this important to you? Why did you bring this? How much was it? I don't know, right? So I think Bloom's taxonomy can help you with writing, with thinking of better questions and better activities with students. Another suggestion is thinking routines. I brought 3 of my favorite ones. You can find more thinking routines online. I think, in my opinion, See, Think, Wonder is fantastic, very easy to use. So if we go back, for example, See, Think, and Wonder. First, you ask students to describe what they see in the picture, then what they think about the picture, and then what they wonder about the picture. For example, this picture. What do you see? I see a man wearing a striped tux, holding a magnifying glass, wearing blue sunglasses in a very clean street. This is what they see. This is the obvious part, right? So we often ask students to describe what they see because we want students to be able to use descriptive language, right? We want them to talk about colors, we want them to talk about clothes, the environment in the picture, whatever. And then you go to think. What do you think about this picture? I think this man is an investigator, and I think this is not in Brazil. It doesn't look like anywhere I've been in Brazil. And I wonder what this man is looking at. I wonder why he is with a magnifying glass. I wonder what he is exploring. So if you use See, Think, Wonder with students, you will have students describing what they see, which is the first step of the thinking routine, and then what they think about the picture. What they think about the picture is a connection between what's there in the picture and what's here, what's in their background knowledge, their experiences, their life experiences. So I said that I think this is not Brazil because I've never been to a street like that with houses like this, like wooden houses in Brazil. So I'm connecting this to my experiences in my life. This is more engaging than talking about what I see, because what I see is probably what my friend sees and what the teacher sees, what everybody in the class sees, right? So sometimes if I ask my students, I show them a picture and ask, guys, what do you see? And then nobody says anything. It's not because my students don't see anything. It's because they see exactly what everybody else is seeing. So what is the intentionality in stating the obvious? Maybe that's just not interesting. And why am I going to describe a picture that everybody can see? I cannot describe the picture better than my colleagues' eyes. But if I say what I think about the picture, this is my perspective. This is what I see. And this is particular to me. This is mine. So this is interesting. You can compare what you think about a picture. Very hard to compare what you see about a picture. And what you wonder is where I think you get students to the highest level of reflection on a picture, about a picture, because what you wonder, it's mostly related to you. It's what you want to find. It's what you would like to know about the picture. If you're preparing students for international exams, helping them with this routine will probably help them in the test as well, because international exams require students to talk about pictures, right? So what if you get a picture of a person doing gardening? Talk about the picture. You got 2 minutes. It's very hard to talk about a picture and use 2 minutes to talk about a picture. But if you talk about what you see, what you think, what you wonder about that picture, you can get much more than 2 minutes, right? So back to thinking routines. Think, puzzle, and explore. Think, puzzle, explore, they are slightly different from see, think, wonder. You starting think, what do you think about a situation? puzzle, you're going to create questions about this situation. So you're going to create research questions. And explore, you're going to go online, you're going to get books, you're going to interview people in the school community, you're going to interview your family to find the answers to these questions. This is how Think, Puzzle, Explore works, right? So instead of just getting students to look at a picture or look at a situation and describe the situation, they think about it, they talk about it, they create research questions, and they go online or research and ask people to find the answers to these questions. Circle of viewpoints is interesting when you can get the same fact, the same event, and break it into and find different perspectives to look at this this same event. For example, I was talking the other day to a group of teachers, to some friends of mine, about tests and how important tests are in the school environment, and that tests are important because even though teachers don't are not very might not be very fond of tests, because if you're teaching a very communicative course and you teach students to speak, a written test is very little valid in terms of assessing these goals. But if you break it into different viewpoints, if you look at the parents' perspective, parents who have had a very traditional education, tests are very valid. Parents see tests as a valid means of assessing, and they might not see presentations as valid as written tests. And then you have to look at tests from the administration, from the school administration point of view, because if parents don't see the school's assessment system as valid, the school might lose students, and yet the school administration has to deal with that. So looking at the same thing from different viewpoints can spark more interesting questions, can spark questions that are a bit more, how can we say, a bit more critical about the topic, right? So you can explore further this topic if you look at it from different points of view. An adaptation of circle viewpoints, for example, is to get a statement and ask students to move to the classroom, or now that we're online, we'll have to get students to breakout rooms in terms of strongly agree, strongly disagree, agree, or disagree. And then you get students to go to breakout rooms or to organize themselves in groups to discuss and gather the information from their peers to why they disagree or agree or strongly disagree or strongly agree. And then when you get together in the big group again, you will have these 4 viewpoints of students discussing the same question, the same point, the same statement, right? Benedict said, who are these questions directed to? The Dora questions are meant for children who are yet to speak the mother tongue language, learning a foreign language in line with their intellect. I'm not sure I understand your question, Benedict, but I believe that because we're not talking about Dora questions in the show, right? We're talking about asking too many display questions in our classes and trying to strike a better balance between display questions and referential questions, right? So it's not, again, it's not stop, it's not, I'm not in favor here of not asking display questions, because display questions are fundamental to assess students on the go. So if you're going through this informal formative assessment during class and you want to check if students understood this concept before you move on to practice or before you move on to a different task, asking display questions is very, very important, because you want to know that students grasp that idea before you move on. But my point here is that if we try to strike a balance between real, authentic questions, referential questions, and display questions, we're going to have an environment that is much more, a classroom environment that is much more authentic, and that, in line with what Thornbury says, having more authentic conversations in class. Of course, take this with a pinch of salt, because if you're dealing with very young learners and basic students with very little control over the language, of course, you're going to have students are going to struggle with authentic, 100% authentic conversations, right? But it's a heads up to adding more referential questions, adding more authentic questions to spark authentic conversation in the class, instead of having display questions dominate most of the lesson. This is my point of view. Can we go back to our questions? Yeah. So I'd like you to choose one of these answers in the screen and answer them in the chat. Can you pick one? Oh, Carol, you don't see anything? You don't see the questions on the screen? Oh, Carol. Oh. Try refreshing your browser, Carol. Okay, display questions are important for assessing learners' understanding of concepts of content taught. Yes, that's you're answering second question, I believe, right, Margaret? IRF, that's initiation, response, and feedback, right? It's when the teacher asks the question, the student responds, and the teacher gives the student feedback. What did you do last weekend? I went to the shopping mall. Very good. Andre, what did you do last weekend? Right? I'm on the app. Oh, okay. Display questions are concept questions meant to check meaning we already know. Yes, they're important. Okay, display questions are not only concept checking questions, right? But they can be concept checking questions. Mm-hmm. I'm making exactly these questions here. My opinion about the balance between those kind of questions is to explore both to aid students' needs. Yes, William, that's very in sync with what I believe too. Referential question to an elementary student. Yes, Rafael. What did you do last weekend? What's your favorite band? What's your favorite restaurant? Do you like pop music? Yeah. Display questions are like step by step to get the content. Yes, they're important. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And now my question to you, which of these questions are display questions? And which of them are referential questions? First and third are display. Yes, they are. There's one more display. Second is referential. Mm-hmm. I don't know the answer to that question, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah, what does IRF stand for? That's also display. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Good. So I think we achieved the aim here. So the final remark I'd like to leave you with is that if we know that language learning happens in communication, shouldn't we strive to make it as authentic, meaningful, and valid as possible? Because the more authentic we get our in-class interactions to be, I believe that we give students the chance of seeing real language in real use inside the classroom as well. So back to the main point, it's not banning Dora questions from the classroom. They are important. Display questions are important, but it's adding referential questions as well so that we have more authentic and more meaningful and more valid interactions in the classroom. And this is what I have planned for today. Any final questions? Any recommended bibliography for? I would recommend a book. I forgot the name. It's you can Google thinking routines. I think, in my opinion, thinking routines are very interesting to deal with communicative classes. I forgot the name of the author. Yeah, I won't remember. But do go for thinking routines. Visible thinking is quite an interesting topic as well. Um, can you give more examples of questions in the wonder part of See, Think, Wonder routine? Sure, Flavia. For example, I wonder. Imagine you're looking at. Okay, so we're looking at a picture. I wonder. I wonder where this picture was taken. I wonder why this picture was taken. I wonder what the photographer was thinking when he took the picture. I wonder where this picture is going to be published. If you're exploring a text, I wonder where this text was published. I wonder what the author had in mind for his communicative goal. I wonder I wonder if my peers agree with the author. I think these are some questions that students can ask. And then again, when you're using the See, Think, Wonder routine, the wonder, all of these parts, right? See, think, and wonder, students are doing them. It's not the teacher's job to ask the questions or to talk about it. So what you're doing is write the routine. This is what I do. So it's not mandatory. Come on. I like to write see, think, wonder on the board. And now that my students are used to it, but I ask them to tell me what you see in the picture, tell me what you think about it, and ask me 3 questions and come up with 3 questions about the picture or 3 questions about the text, what you think about the text, what you see in the text, right? So this is students' work. Yeah. Well, so thank you very much for being here today. If you haven't yet, click the button here somewhere, I think, in Explore Troika, and take a look at our membership. And I'll see you in the next webinar. Thank you very much for being here again. Bye-bye.